Evening and welcome to another edition of Friday Night Magpie Live. Lots to get through this evening, courtesy of an interesting fans forum yesterday evening. Congratulations to everyone that went along and managed to navigate the traffic ahead of Nottingham Forest's UEFA Cup defeat. What were your thoughts on it? Those of you who went along, share your views. I watched it online, and I think there were some very good things, perhaps some less so good things, but nevertheless, good that the club fulfilled those obligations with both owners, chief executive, and the head coach all on hand to answer questions. So let's discuss the thoughts and views you've got from that. And of course, it's a home game tomorrow against Oldham Athletic. I remember the days when we used to play them in the top flight of English football. Kind of changed for both clubs since then, but it'll be a five-figure crowd tomorrow, well over 10,000. Should be a good atmosphere, even though it's only fourth tier level. Team news coming up on that. Many of you will have heard the presser given by Martin Patterson earlier today. Thoughts and discussion points from the forum last night. So I kind of paraphrase some of the key ones for you, and we can discuss and get your thoughts and views on them in the show tonight. Football wise, because that's the most important thing. Matty Platt, about 2 weeks off getting back onto the grass, said Martin Patterson. A surprise announcement. I checked it all out with the club earlier today as well. Director of Performance, Dr. David Rhodes, who was appointed in the summer as part of this kind of overarching football technical board. He'd been due to did start on the 1st of August. On Monday, earlier this week, he resigned from his post for personal reasons. So, Director of Performance, Dr. David Rhodes, has regrettably had to leave the club for personal reasons. In terms of a replacement for Roberto Gagliardi, Director of Football, the Reitz brothers said that they were well down the line with sourcing a replacement and hope to make an announcement in the near future. One of the ones that raised an eyebrow or two for me was the comments from the chief executive, Joe Palmer, when he spoke about sustainability, financial balancing acts, juggling acts in lower league clubs. Knots, of course, are committed to trying to become self-sustainable without needing cash injections from the Reach brothers. I think people know my, some would say, cynical views. No chance. Absolutely no chance. However, Knots are striving towards that. And an interesting point that Joe Palmer mentioned was that 2026, 27, Joe was talking about getting closer to breaking even without the brothers putting any more loans into the club. But the caveat to that was assuming we were still in League Two. And the point that Joe was making was that when we better get promoted, that would then mean a substantial cash injection from the brothers because of increased wages. And so, if I read it correctly, and I've seen other people pick up on this point or listened to it correctly, we will have a better balance sheet in League Two than we would League One, i.e., we would not lose as much money. Now, personally, I think that's a bit of a dangerous avenue to go down. Clearly, some fans will say, lack of ambition, don't want to go up because it's going to cost us more money. For me, the be all and end all of a football club is not this theoretical financial sustainability, break even. It's about playing in as high a standard of football as we can. And as I've said many times before, if you've got an average crowd of 9 to 10,000 and you're in the fourth tier of English football, sorry, I think you're underachieving, particularly when you consider we are currently competing against clubs in League Two, with crowds of 5, 6, 7,000. Anyway, your thoughts on that? On the plus side, Joe Palmer did announce some more details of the Notts Heritage group. It's going to be set up as a charity. Club issued a formal press statement this morning. Very good. We all know we're the world's oldest professional football club. We all know we have an unparalleled heritage as a result of that tagline, that title. And the club now are setting up a charity, first building blocks towards being able to assemble and display memorabilia in some form of a museum setting. I think that's great. No one can take the fact away that we are the oldest professional football club in the world. As such, we don't necessarily are able to display and showcase that to large numbers of our own supporters, let alone anybody else. The owners were quite unequivocal on the subject of finance, writing off of 10.75 million in loans. Christopher Reitz specifically said that this was a financial accountancy procedure, and that the brothers remain fully committed, and I think he used the phrase, in the very long term to Notts. Always been my view the brothers are here for the long haul. Some people have been saying that by reducing the debt on the club's balance sheet, this makes it, if you like, more appealing to potential buyers. That is correct. But the way the brothers were talking last night, this is an accountancy exercise rather than a precursor to selling the club. And Christopher Reitz was very specific and direct and said, we're in it for the very long term. And I take him at his word and the brothers' word. Not so good news, depending on your take on it. No new signings before transfer window opens on January the 1st, i.e. we are not going to be going, as things stand, into the free contract market, free agent market. And as such, Angus MacDonald will not be signing for Notts County, despite having a trial recently. The club also confirmed they're close to announcing a successor to Roberto Gagliardi as director of football. I guess a lot of people will speculate as to whether that is Richard Montague returning or not. Right. I think that's kind of most of the subject matter points. Feel free to dive in with anything else that you want to raise and to discuss this evening. Let's go on the message boards and get a quick, if you like, cross-section of views. PJ Defiance show regular. I was hoping for someone to ask the brothers how seriously they want promotion this season. Nigel Cameron, we're promotion hopefuls on a stringent and rather rigid budget FC. Nigel Cameron, however, 10,000 do turn up no matter what, week after week, as long as we're winning. PJ Defiance, nice to see the Midtjylland fans at the Nest yesterday too. Royston says, the answers the brothers gave about players being sold and the recruitment were what we already knew. PJ Defiance adds, I'm not sure, but I do think they vetted the questions that were sent in. As for a third kit, what is the real reason for a hold up? Supply issues. I'll tell you a bit more about that with Puma shortly. They were politicians' answers, says Nigel Cameron. Colin Metcalf, I found the forum quite interesting. Both answered some questions and raised some questions for me. I don't own the club All I can do is support and hope we don't regret certain decisions. Evening from Bud Chatwin. The answer to a new head of football sounded, in my opinion, like they are coming close to a decision not to have one. Yeah, I'd probably take a polar opposite view, Bud. For me, I think they're not far off unveiling someone, but let's see. Do we, Ian Cooksey? Do we really need a director of football and a doctor? Save some money and invest in the playing staff, maybe. Evening from Jurgen Halligan, who did ask one of the questions last night. Ian Cooksey goes on, the most worrying part is that they think that the last two January transfer windows have been successful. Clearly, football is all about opinions. I think it was Alex Reeds, if memory serves, that answered a question about what they thought about January transfer windows. He felt that both had been successes. Michael Fletcher, what was said about the match programme? I didn't hear anything. Scott Taylor, please, Paul, could we could we take a moment to have a laugh at West Bridgford Wanderers? Look, I grew up in an era where we competed in the same division in the top flight, and there's nothing I detest more than the patronising kind of Forest tap you on the head. We really like Notts County. I can assure you, when we were in the same division, most of the time, and it didn't bother me as a teenager. You spent ensuring you didn't get your head kicked in. I can assure you that when we were on equal terms, Forest fans did bother about us. Right now, we are a long way away, I must admit, but they are our local rivals. Dave Hartshon, evening, Paul. 2,000 tomorrow beats total of away fans so far this season for our home games. Yeah, I think the point Dave is making there is we've had quite a succession of clubs with very small away followings. And if you add up all of those games away fans, it doesn't come to 2,000, which is what Oldham will be bringing tomorrow. Johnny, Paul, where can I find the fans forum to watch? If you go on either the club's Facebook or go on the club website, there's some links to it there. I know it's been a bit more difficult, and the link has not necessarily always worked today. I think now it is, and you should be able to find a link, and you just click on that link, and then you can watch the whole. It's about an hour and a half, I think. Haunted House getting back onto football. So glad Robbo is back and starting now. Much needed battler and baller. Tell you a little story. I was talking with him in the gym Wednesday, and he was saying, I said, very well done, great to have you back. And I said, you did really well not to bite when they were trying to provoke you and get you sent off in the closing minutes, because we all thought he was on a yellow. And he told me the story that the incident earlier in the second half, the yellow card was brandished and shown to Scotty, but it was actually Jacob Beddoe that the referee booked. Scott was under the impression that he had been booked in that incident, so therefore was trying to make sure he got through the game, not getting a second yellow, and he only realised after the game. And there you go. Which I suppose probably stopped Scotty thinking he was on a yellow from, shall we say, exacting a bit more retribution from that guy who was trying to get him sent off. But there you go. Just shows you, doesn't it? Jurgen Halligan lost a lot of memorabilia when Munto, among others, tried to do this, as it all went missing, says Jurgen. I think there have been all sorts of claims and counterclaims as to memorabilia, not just with Munto, Jurgen, but an ongoing basis, shall we say, disappearing. I think very much Joe Palmer's view here is that by having a charity and minuting And what happens in these situations, for anyone that is thinking a little bit further down the line of giving some memorabilia to the club that they have, you don't actually give it away. You sign a standardized letter at which you agree to loan the shirt, cap, trophy, program, whatever it is. You get a copy of that, and therefore that is your inverted commas confirmation. And normally with these things, the club would commit to ensuring the item for its appropriate value, so that in that way, if something happened to it, you would be covered by the club's insurance for those pieces of memorabilia, which can be very valuable. And that, I believe, is how Joe's looking to set this all up with the charity and do it properly. And I'm sure we all wish them the very best in what they're doing. Richard Terry, I missed the fans forum because I was away. Available online, yeah. Patterson starting to sound positive. Evening from Elvis Bot. Haunted House. We need Jatta to pull his socks up now and start playing like he did last season. Off call. Good evening, Hull fan in peace. Loved living in Newcastle for 8 years. Off course, I wonder if you might be realising that the Magpie Circle is for the original Magpies and black and white striped players, which is little old Notts County, not Newcastle United. You may well have realised that by now. Jurgen Halligan. He says in time for Christmas. I think he's referring to a third kit. Harvey E. When it was pointed out in the forum that Martin started 9 players from last year recently, it seems the illusion was missed that he was unimpressed with the new signings and thus this year's recruitment. I remember the question. Clearly what Martin is in the market here for is to keep all of his players on side, to keep them motivated, not to single them out. He often talks, doesn't he, at length about, not if you like, talking about individuals. So I wouldn't take too much from that, other than the obvious. He felt that those 11 deserved to be starting, and that only 2 of the 11 players signed this summer weren't worthy on that particular weekend of starting. Derek Flowers, what's the point of a third kit? Would it make us a better team? I'm not against a third kit, Derek. Normally what happens with the third kit is they make it a limited edition, so there's a much smaller number of shirts, and for those people that want that shirt, and they want to buy it, what's the harm, really? I think the issue has been, as I understand it, that there have been supply issues and problems with Puma, and hence why it's quite late in the day. So hopefully they've got that pretty soon. I don't think they've got it yet. But clearly you'd want that third shirt out before Christmas, wouldn't you? There's little point in having it. More money into the club having a third kit, says Jurgen. Haunted House, the club's financial situation is horrible. Bud Chatwin, I can remember beating Villa first game of the season in the top flight. About only 1 of 3 times in my life we have been above Forest. Yeah, that was Villa 0, Notts 1, wasn't it? August 1981. Andy Eason. I have to say that Tuesday's performance against Barnsley was refreshingly good. Ian Cooksey, I'm not stating the obvious, but there is a little bit of difference between Bedo and Robbo in appearance. I think the point was it was the way that the yellow card was shown, and it was shown in the direction of Scott thought it was in his direction. They've both been involved in that incident, if you remember. One made the tackle, one inverted commas dissent. So I think that is where the confusion came. Robbie, I was happy with what I heard last night at the forum. The club is on the right path on and off the field. The owners are committed to the club for the long haul. That was very much, I thought, an important point that was very clearly stated by Christopher Reitz. Johnny says, on the subject of memorabilia, I got Casper's goalkeeping glove signed in the promotion season. Jurgen Halligan, I got a receipt for all of my memorabilia, which I donated last time from Tony Cuthbert. Hopefully, this time better organised. Kieran Widdowson, pretty poor refereeing if the players themselves don't know who's been cautioned. Yeah, and of course, it was a Premier League referee as well, wasn't it? Ian Cooksey, this season is 50 years since we last finished above Forest in the league. So that would have been 75, Ian. I think that was the year before Cloughie, wasn't it? Or 2 years before Cloughie. Did Les Brad score that year and we beat Forest at the City Ground? Happy days. Greza Maxwell. Greza. I went to see an old friend in Beeston today with my daughter Eva and went past the university. So I swung in to watch the Notts train in the rain for 20 minutes. And I won't read the last bit. Derek Flowers, he's not happy with the kit situation. Then why not have a fourth and fifth kit if it makes us more money? Robbie, yeah, interesting one. I hope that we will see Will Jarvis in the squad Saturday. Thought he did very well Tuesday. Adam Kent, I came away from the fans forum impressed with Martin Patterson. Seems to want to win matches using a range of players and tactics. Looking forward to the rest of the season. What else have we got? Andy Eason. Several individuals gave the gaffer a nudge as regards selection on Tuesday night. Bennett's, Jarvis, Ness, and in particular, Kuyar, for me, did themselves the power of good. Haunted House, can I ask people's thoughts on Palmer? Is he still good enough to play and be captain? In about 4 words, absolutely yes. Martin Patterson would tend to agree as well, as you know, I think he's been pretty much ever present this season. PJ Defiance, can we leave Puma and go to Adidas, please? I think there's a few shirts behind here. I've always wondered why we've never gone for Adidas and that shirt again. My views on Puma, I think we've been with them quite a long time now. I'm not exactly sure. I think obviously Joe Palmer, the CEO, has been tasked with generating increased revenues. I think he inherited a deal with Puma, so that what it's meant for Joe is that the club have not been able to go out to tender again for a new kit supplier. You know, my personal view, I think we're past our sell-by date with Puma. A lot of the time, the training gear can be very similar. I think it's a matter of record that the club have had supply issues with Puma, and we've been with them a very long. I'm trying to remember. We've got to have been with Puma for 8 years more. I do wonder if it is time for a change, but clearly you have to honour the existing agreements. And as I say, I don't think currently it's up for renewal. So I think it's Puma for a little while. Robbie, I think the squad is stronger now than last season. I think that's very important. Is that a view shared by other people, or would you disagree? Certainly, the brothers last night said they felt overall the squad was stronger. Adam Kent, with no plans to get in another keeper, let's get behind Roos. Confidence breeds success. Yeah, I mean, I'm on the record many times, Adam. Look, Keller Roos is in goal for Notts County, full stop, between us, we've all got to do the very, very, very best that we can. Haunted House. Who would have Dan Crowley back? Yeah, he's not always getting a look in at MK Dons. I think the wages that he's got for himself, why shouldn't he, at MK Dons would preclude him from moving back here, however, Haunted House. Andy Eason, poor old AJ, not selected for the Gambia squad. This misses on an away holiday, sorry, trip, to the Seychelles. I think it caught me on the hop, one or two other people. I'd seen earlier in the day that Alassania was not called up by Gambia again. And so you then start to think, right, well, we won't have three players. So therefore, we would not have the option to request a postponement. I'm not even sure if the club have 100% confirmed it now, but my understanding is the three players that we do have, which means the game is postponed, is Kuyar with Afghanistan, Tyrese Hall with Jamaica under 21s, I think it is, and Jody Jones for Malta. I think Malta are playing the Netherlands, so I'm pretty sure Jody would fancy being involved in that one. Right. Ian Cooksey believes we're contracted to the end of 27, 28, I believe, with Puma. I think it's got, yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's got a year or two to run. S.E. Kent, surely the players we have retained have been retained to play. Why else? To fulfill the curse of the calendar. Ian Cooksey says 75 76 was Clough's first full season. Haunted House. He's on a productivity bonus. Tyrese will be a diamond for us this season. I'm just waiting to hear the chant that the cop create for him. Ian Cooksey, yeah, I'm glad you've raised it. I was going to discuss this. Away from football for a minute, says Ian, I thought the service for Kim Walster was a beautiful tribute to her. Indeed, it was. I was at the ground when the funeral cortege came, and the club arranged with the family for the hearse to drive along the back of the Pavis stand. I saw Martin Patterson there, other senior execs paying their respects as the cortege went round the back of the Pavis stand, back out the other side, made its way onto Wilford Hill Crematorium. I went to the crematorium, lots of Notts fans there, and I was fortunate to be able to get a place inside the service, which was being back to the Trent Navigation. Liam Boyle, the club's chaplain, took the service. It was a lovely service. There were some lovely photos of Kim. One that I particularly liked and I'd not seen was a photo of Kim in her best purple frock next to a very suave, a very debonair Sven Göran Eriksson, which I thought was a lovely photo. And there were lots of other photos there. Great service, and some of Kim's nephews, nieces, and younger relatives gave some readings, and I thought that they all spoke extremely well. It's very, very difficult, if you've never had to do it, to speak for a loved one at a funeral service. One of the hardest things that you do. I thought it was a great service. Clearly, Notts fans everywhere. And clearly a very emotional occasion as well. But I thought it was very good. And then the Jaeger bombs commenced at the Navy. I didn't go there because if I have more than one Jaeger bomb, I would not be on this show tonight. I would be in bed. So I thought I'll keep it as a consummate professional. But yeah, Ian's brought it up, and I thought it was a very, very good tribute and a very, very good service to Kim. Her and her family, as I've said before, are one of, if not the most fanatical Notts family that I have come across. Okay, back to the message boards and others. Jurgen Halligan, a better squad this season apart from goalkeeper. Will he risk Griffiths on Saturday? But Chatwin, I think Tyrese Hall will be as good, if not better, than Abbott. I thought Pato spoke very well at the forum, says Greza. I agree. If we go to Adidas shirts, it will be nearer 80 to 90 quid a pop. All them floors you put down, Greza, you can afford them. Steve Geldard, of course, Matty Palmer is good enough to play and captain. He is back to his best again. PJ Defiant says to Greza, think of all the extra money for the club. Derek Flowers confirms that we've been with Puma since 2017. Greza, we're all on productivity bonuses. That's very good. It makes my job a little bit easier. Regards, Matty Palmer. Last season he was average. This season he's been a lot better, in my opinion. Steve Geldard is all for bringing in young Griffiths. As he can. So, but again, at the beginning of the season, I said no to Palmer as captain, but now I think he's earned his title. Elvis Botts talking about Swindon having some players called up too, and let's just spell this out so everybody knows. A week on Saturday, that trip to Swindon has been postponed. No, no new date has been arranged yet. Club will communicate that in due course. If you've bought tickets for the game, you can, I believe, because of a change of date, claim a refund if you cannot now make what is likely to be a midweek game, and fully appreciate it is more difficult for people to get to Swindon for a midweek game compared to a Saturday game. But I think there's some form of charter or whatever now that because of a change of date, you can reclaim your cost of your ticket. I guess the one area where fans lose out is if you've pre-booked advance rail tickets and pre-booked advance hotel stays, which often are not refundable. Steve Geldar, regarding the cop, why don't the players go around the ground to show their appreciation like they do to the cop, especially the family stand? The kids would love it and maybe get some autographs. I think this was a question that was raised last night at the forum as well. Richard Wood, a question was asked about the restrictions on away fans. It was said that Joe Palmer said it had nothing to do with policing and road closures, but it's about atmosphere. Yeah, I've kind of done this one to death a bit, but I mean, as you've raised the point, Richard, it was kind of, I thought, I wasn't sure I really agreed with the sentiments of Joe on that one. I think, as I've said before, the reason we potentially look to cap away fans has very little to do with the additional costs, which Joe pointed out last night. So there has been a view, we cap it at 2 because it costs us money to let more than 2 in terms of increased security costs, closing roads, the police dictate this, police dictate that. Notts can open that stand all the time that they want. If they wanted to have 4,000 home fans in there, they could do that. Clearly, there are some increased stewarding costs, sometimes police costs, depending on the category of the game, but they clearly do not dwarf or overshadow the additional monies that come in. If, for instance, Oldham could have sold 3,000 tickets, which I believe they could have done, talking to some people I know in Oldham, that's 1,000 tickets. Let's take an average of £15. You've got the VAT to come off ticket prices and things like that. So let's say it's £15. So an extra 1,000. Do the maths. Yeah. So you're getting 15 grand extra income, even if you were talking 5 grand extra costs, which I don't think it would be. You're talking 10 grand. Bottom line, into the club skyrocket. And clearly that doubles if you sold it for 4,000. Now, the point that Joe was making was that 18 months ago, whenever it was, 2 years ago, we gave the whole away end to Mansfield. They filled it, and not to put too fine a point on it, they battered us. Now, Joe's view, or said there was a view at the time, that Mansfield took over Meadow Lane, and that was the reason they beat us. I would respectfully, I couldn't disagree more with Joe on this particular one. Mansfield beat us because they were miles better than us. They were a much better team on the day, and over the course of the season, they got a lot more points than us. I think we ended up. Did we end up finishing 14th? They were a better team, full stop. So I don't think it had anything to do with away fans. We lost to Salford a few weeks ago. What did they have? 26 people in the stand. I'm exaggerating. I doubt it touched 100. So that, if you're going to use that rationale, then we should always beat Salford because they ain't got no fans. So I don't buy it. But I look, I understand that I can understand the sentiment. I thought it was a very interesting response, which I think is what you're alluding to, from Martin Patterson afterwards. And I think the gist of what he said was, I prepare a team to win a game, not bothered whether it's 4,000, 2,000, 50 fans or whatever. I'm backing my team to win. So some people will say it's an unfair, you don't need to give a team a competitive advantage. My point of view, allied to, there's a lot of debate about money, finances, and how we make every pound count in terms of off revenue streams, which Joe and the club have done extremely well. The commercial operations since Adam Chantry was appointed by Joe are chalk and cheese compared to what they used to be. The club brings in substantial more commercial revenues across the board in sponsorships and hospitalities and those sorts of things, and they do it very, very well. But if we're going to focus on getting every nickel and dime into the club, which I understand, why do we turn down 1,000 fans, 1,500 fans, 750 fans prepared to pay us £20? You either make a decision to maximize money, or you don't. And certainly I got the impression from Martin Patterson that doesn't particularly bother him. And personally, if we're talking about football advantage here, I think you have to include the head coach in that discussion about how many away fans. And if your head coach is absolutely, I don't want the opposition getting any advantage at all, you have to bear that in mind. Conversely, a clever head coach might say, no, you can sell 4,000 every week. But by the way, because I'm sanctioning more away fans going into the stand, that means a bigger budget. I want a bit more money on the playing budget, and I want you to spend a bit more money, and we might need an extra player in January or whatever it is. Anyway, that's a long-winded answer to number of away fans being allowed into the ground. What else have we got on the boards? Tim Watchorn, I know it's about money, but if it was left to me, we would play in the stripes every time. He's talking about kits and would play, I assume there, Tim, in the home kit all the time. I think years ago, yes. I think it's largely moved on now. I think it's large. I don't necessarily have an issue with that on a personal level. Richard Wood sent that in again in terms of the fans. Hopefully, we've dealt with that in terms of away fans. John Parr, good to hear Martin talk positively about the FA Cup. Hopefully, we will have a run this season. We do appear to have someone who is, focusing a little bit more on succession cup competitions, because we have been starved of it for a long, long time now. Andy Eason, how fantastic it would have been if Harrison Iwunzi's goal had stood against Barnsley. Yeah, I mean, I think the club, I think he stands a chance. I think he stands a chance. That's the view from within the club. Look, he's young, he's raw, but yeah, he's got a chance, and it would be wonderful to see someone come through that academy and get out on the pitch in League Two, and make a little bit of a name for themselves. He would clearly have huge support from the fan base. Steve Geldard, we should give away fans the same allocation that we receive at their ground. John Parr, we could have stretched it to 3,000 and still have a great crowd. Ian Cooksey, I can guarantee if we get a big draw at home in the FA Cup, there will be more than 2,000 away fans. You have to give a higher percentage in FA Cup games. PJ Defiance, I can remember being sat in the Cyril stand and seeing the Kop full of Leeds United fans. We gave them as good as it got. I think the game finished 4-3. Tony Yeboah and Devon White on the score sheet. Adam Kent, I agree, Paul, with away crowds. Similar happened to Wrexham at home. All fans love a full stadium. Andrew Rayson, JP's, Joe Palmer. We use initials for everything, don't we? Response to the question made me think that if we got promotion to League One or League or beyond, we'd still cap it to 2,000 away fans. My understanding is that wouldn't be the case. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. I think the club have done some research, and you get into League One, and then that opens up a substantial number more of away fans. Lincoln, Doncaster, even Burton. You see, if it was last year, it would have been Birmingham City coming here. Next year, if we go up, there's certainly a pretty high chance Sheffield Wednesday will be in the third tier, the way it's looking at the minute. You'd think Chris Wilder would sort Sheffield United out. But if he didn't, then you're looking at a large number of fans from away clubs. And I believe if you like, the policy changes a bit in League One, because you would need more money, for wages and all the rest of it. Reza Maxwell, give away fans the stand at Meadow Lane and let the Notts fans into the Cyril, something I've advocated for a long time. Adam Kent, we aren't going to fill the Cyril, Kop and Pavis anytime soon, but I think the challenge at the minute, Adam, is that the second biggest stand we've got can be at 10-20% occupancy for quite a lot of the time this season, which I'm not sure is ideal. But Chatwin, I was in the Kop as a youngster when that was sectioned by huge wire fences, I remember it, and Leeds United climbed over them all and took it over, and we had to run into the main stand. Derek Flowers, the Nest has 12 events advertised up to Christmas, plus the away fans for Forest games in between those events. Look, undoubtedly the Nest is going to be a significant money earner for the club. Do you think it would be quite interesting to understand a little bit more from the club about plans for Meadow Lane Sports Bar? Because clearly someone pointed out to me earlier today in a conversation, the money from the Nest is not necessarily totally new money. you've effectively got to take the money you get from the Nest, which is clearly far bigger than what the club was previously getting from the Meadow Lane Sports Bar. So it's an interesting, if you like, marker. Will we ever get to play Juve at Meadow Lane soon? Says PJ. Only if we're prepared to offer, I don't know, $500,000, I would have thought, to get them here. Those big clubs now, command huge fees. I think Juventus feel, understandably so, they've done their bit for the partnership by inviting us to open their stadium. And most of these really big clubs now look to raise significant monies in pre-season, and they go to the market where they get the most money, be that America, Asia, you name it. Sad to say, I wouldn't hold your breath. John Parr, do we think Notts fans should be allowed in the Jimmy Cyril? Would easy to do segregation with barrier? I totally agree. There's very little space in the Pavis these days. But Chatwin, turn the Meadow Lane Sports Bar into a larger club shop or museum, so possible. So one thing we're not quite touched on, possibly properly yet, were those comments about the club sustainability and, if you like, closer to balancing the books in League Two than we would be in League One. Is it me that's just worried about that, or concerned about the optics of we won't lose as much money in League Two as we would in League One? That is at odds when we had the brothers on this show, and we are going back 2 to 3 years now, where Christopher was quite specific and said for their model to work and start to break even, he said the club needed to be in League One. So that's quite an opposite approach from what Joe was propagating last night. I think the reality is we ain't going to be making any money in whatever division we're in. But do we have any thoughts and views on that? I think it's dangerous, if I'm honest. I think it's a dangerous comment, really. It lays itself open to the clubs lacking in ambition. And I do believe the brothers are ambitious for the club, and I do believe the brothers are in it for the long haul. I suspect they've had to reevaluate certain things along the way, probably readdress how much it's going to cost them. But what are our thoughts? Greza Maxwell, Paul, can you put the person who irons your shirts on gardening leave because your collars are always curled under? That's a great sexist comment, Greza Maxwell. Good job that Mrs. Mace doesn't watch or listen to these, because you would be on an ultra black of black lists. And I don't know where Mrs. Greza Maxwell is. I'm sure she would afford herself a wry smile if you are saying that you don't do your own ironing either, and that you rely on your significant other, as Del Boy once famously said in Only Fools and Horses. Colin Metcalf, I'm also concerned about the comments on sustainability. Reading between the lines, sounds like we are content to stay in League Two for the next 2 seasons. That is the clear point that you kind of, and I'm sure Joe didn't necessarily mean it how it came out, but for me, absolutely. Now, I don't think the brothers want to stay in League Two rather than League One, but that kind of comment lays yourself open to people interpreting it in that way. Finn says, hi, Paul. Late joining. Do we think tomorrow will be on due to the wind? The flippant and sarcastic answer would be obviously the scoreboard in a previous year or two didn't cope too well with the wind, did it? I think the wind got up to 1.5 miles an hour, and one tile fell off the scoreboard. So we cancelled the game against Colchester on the basis it's going to be about 40 mile an hour. One hopes that we did a full remedial works process to ensure tiles do not fall off the scoreboard overnight. Gresham Maxwell, don't worry, the missus is in Spain. She might be tuning in, Greza. She might be tuning in. Steve Geldard, if we get promoted to League One, it would make us more money. Even with extra wages, think of the extra club shop sales and increased gate. Look, I'm with you, Steve, on that. I'm with you. Ultimately, the brothers will not be judged on whether they made this club break even or not. They will be judged, not dissimilar to a Jack Dunnett or a Derek Pavis, in where they got the club to in the pecking order of the league, and for me, we are punching a long way below where we should be, not above it. I know we've been in non-league, but we've had 6 years with the brothers who've run the club, backed the club, cost them 17 odd million quid. For me, one promotion is the absolute bare minimum, and with 9,000 fans every week, we damn well should be in the top 3 of this league. And that's not an entitlement. That's, we have capability to raise more money than 90% of the teams. And if we spend that money really wisely, absolutely, we should be a top 3 team. Ian Cooksey, previous statements have been along the lines that the brothers wanted to take us as far as they could. This slightly contradicts that statement. Yeah. Adam Kent, I preferred being in the Cyril. I'm currently in the Cop. Would you put away fans towards the Cop? Would be more fun. I suspect the police might have a slight issue with that one, which is clearly why at the moment we put them at the other end. PJD Fights was interesting about what Joe Palmer said about the pitch. Yeah, it seems to have been a very, very virulent strain, and the ground staff have had to work extremely hard to ensure that that didn't translate or commute itself to other owned properties of the club, i.e. the training ground facility at the university. Greza Maxwell, if a tile falls off tomorrow, here we go, a certain goalkeeper wouldn't catch the tile. He'd punch it over the Cyril. Greza, I know. You can't resist it, can you? You can't resist it. John Parr, Notts should be in the Championship, in my opinion, not thinking about League Two. Steve Geldard, Championship should be what we aim for. I think this is our level. Wouldn't disagree with any of those. Clearly that means more money. Brothers have indicated that's kind of where they want to get us to. So when we suddenly start talking about actually financially we're better off in League Two, I understand where Joe's coming from, but I think it sends out the wrong signals. Let's be perfectly honest. When we have season ticket campaigns in June, we talk about promotion. I am assuming the reason, or one of the reasons, why the previous incumbent Stuart Maynard left the club was because the club were unhappy with a playoff finish. So I don't think the brothers are not going for it. I think we do get a tad carried away with sustainability, data this, sustainability that. We're a football club. If you want a successful model, look at Doncaster, look at Bradford, look at Mansfield, look at Burton, look at Lincoln. For the first time in my lifetime, every one of those clubs is playing in a higher standard than Notts County. I stand to be corrected. Every one of them above us. That's poor. It's poor. You can say that brothers, and rightly so, have done very well, but we're only a League Two club. Forget we only just come out the conference and all of that. I really don't buy that. Steve Geldard, regarding the stadium, would it be possible for the disabled supporters to have some cover? Joe did talk about it's kind of a new all-embracing structure being put in touch for the various supporters groups as a conglomerate, if you like, to include the Not Supporters Trust. Are they really still going? Does anyone know how many members they've got? Notts County Supporters Club, Notts County Supporters Association (brackets non-official anymore), disabled supporters, and Lifeline. And I think the club they're bringing a chair in, and there's a structure now being put in place for all of those groups to try to work together rather than sometimes be a little bit antagonistic to each other, which I think is very good. And I would imagine that the DSA, the Disabled Supporters Association, and better facilities would be high on the agenda for the Disabled Supporters Trust. Jurgen Halligan thought the trust had disbanded. Apparently not, Jurgen. Apparently not. Finn says, controversial opinion. Jatta is killing us. From past New Year, he's been poor. The number of chances he misses, not good enough for me. Sometimes players' body language can kind of belie their contribution. Didn't necessarily think Alassania's body language was great Saturday. But for me, scoring goals is the hardest thing in the book. He scored 20 goals in his first full season in English football. For me, that's a big tick. That's a big tick. He's missed a lot of pre-season, in part because of his own mistake, in part because he wasn't able to go on the pre-season tour. So I think it's been a real mess pre-season. I find it interesting that with the club activating a clause in his contract for him to stay, there was no formal announcement. Alassania's said very little, if anything, as far as I am aware. So it's all I accept it's all a bit weird. For me, very, very, very valuable part of our club. And if we're going to entertain thoughts of promotion this year, which we've got to, haven't we? I think he's one of the key components and most vital cogs in that machine of it. Thoughts elsewhere. Adam Kent. Jatta doesn't seem to be pulling his weight at the moment. Maybe a start on the bench on Saturday, provided Dennis is fit. Robbie, slightly counter view. Jatta is still getting in good positions to create those chances. The goals will come. Greza Maxwell, serious note. Sustainably is a solid footing. However, sometimes maybe dipping deeper into the coffers and throw a bit of rhubarb on it, like Wrexham have, for example, and they have motored on. I guess Wrexham is an extreme example, Greza, but I think if you look at Mansfield, a lot less infrastructure, but John Radford has clearly put his money where his mouth is. You look historically over the last 10 years, what Ben Robinson did at Burton before selling the club. You look at what Clive Nates has done at Lincoln. You look at what Chesterfield have done. You look at what Bradford have done from being in a very, having a not dissimilar scenario to us. Promoted last year at our expense in some respects and kicked on this year. We all want to kind of like the blue touch paper. It just feels to me like we're stalling. It's like we're in the middle of the ocean and we know where we want to go to, but we can't catch the wind. We're just stalled. Essie Kent, based on Tuesday's game against Barnsley, Patterson is spoilt for choice tomorrow. Who's going to be our starting 11? Jatta didn't look interested for me on Tuesday, says Derek. James Moore, I've been in Lifeline for 10 to 15 years since Ray True signed me. Bud Chatwin, Bud Tyrese Hall could be a great number 9. S.E. Kent, I think Jatta's lost some of his confidence. Steve Geldard, money does not always buy success. Look at MK Dons. Totally agree with you, Steve. How many clubs have gone up in the years that we have got back into the EFL that haven't spent a bit of money? John Parr, interesting that what Martin said, that the team has been naive when defending a lead. Yes, there were some interesting comments, but Martin to me always speaks well and in a language that that the fan in the street can understand and resonate with. Finn, I agree, it's been turbulent. When Dennis is injured, we lack that fox in the box. Hopefully, Jatta shuts me up with a brace tomorrow. James Moore, I personally think we'll rue not selling him when we had big money on the table. Although at the time we didn't know how Dennis and the young lads would work out. Richard Terry, we shouldn't be in the doldrums tomorrow with the weather forecast. Yeah, woolly overcoats and everything else, I think, tomorrow, Richard. I think team wise, I think will be very interesting tomorrow. Lots of good performances. Martin spoke last night about how sometimes, if not picking itself, there were some relatively straightforward selections. I think, it's probably one of his tougher selection decisions tomorrow because we didn't win against Crewe in the league. Players given chances on Tuesday night, I thought did well. For me, we always joke, don't we, about Jarvis somewhere in the permafrost in Siberia. For me, he gives you something that others don't have. His cross for the goal, his cross for what would have been he wins his goal, but adjudged to have hit his arm on the way into the net. It's a purely personal view. For me, he's a good option to have on the bench. Now whether Martin thinks to earn a place on the bench, he's got to do a bit more in training. Is a possible, but there's a little bit of something there, and historically we've played him extensively inverted. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked good on the right. I thought he looked good. Couldn't half do with exits at the back of the Pavis, says Rob99. I'm with you on that one. It takes me about 20 minutes to get out the ground these days, which when we've won is not a problem. I will never leave a ground before the end of the game. Sacrilege. James Moore, they're talking about winning on Lifeline. I had 3 draws in the first year, then about 2 in the next 10, says James. Gazza listened to the cast last night driving back from West London near Brentford's ground. Switched off when no keeper or striker was discussed. Clearly going budget and trying to get us on the cheap. Robbie 1 striker or 2 on Saturday. Yeah, it's a 50-50 shot, isn't it? Going back to Gazza comment, yes, that was one of the things that Chris Reach spelled out last night. This was a record budget, highest since they came here. And he made, which I think is a valid point, that just because a player's on a free transfer or a loan, don't necessarily think that there are other costs to that deal. So you might sign a player on a free transfer, but there would be a signing on fee to the player. You might sign a free transfer, but the agent of that player would take a fee for engineering a free transfer, perhaps. And I think this was what Chris was alluding to, that there isn't a free arrival of a player per se. There are other costs involved. It will, I think, be very interesting to see payments made to agents by Notts. It'll take a year to come through the system. I wonder if we've paid more to agents this year than previous years. To be honest, I would expect this to be a record year for the budget because of the sales of players that we've had and the previous indication from the owners that the sums of money raised from transfers out would be used to fund the next budget. So therefore, you would think that would go up. Next question. I know you're all going to say, do we think we have got a better squad than last year? I don't think we have. I think we've lost quality. I think we've lost quality in key positions and areas down the spine of the team, and I think you need to have certain positions filled with which you have supreme confidence in those players, and in that regard, I think we are weaker than last year. Proof's in the pudding with the results. Personally, I think Stuart Maynard had a better group of players to work with than currently Stuart, than Martin Patterson does. I certainly think the squad this year is imbalanced, and I think it remains imbalanced until January the 1st, as to whether the club decides to do anything about it in January. And I'd probably disagree with Alex Reitz when he spoke about, he felt they'd had two good January transfer windows. To an extent, they're going to say that anyway. Let's be realistic. I think they were both very poor January transfer windows that did not in any way, shape or form help us push for promotion in the second half of the season. I think in many respects it weakened us, although that first year was clearly exacerbated by the departure of Luke Williams in January. James Moore, one thing I picked out, he says, was the response that the money taken in from Macca, Crawley, Bass was being spent on wages rather than a big transfer fee. Yeah, I noticed that, James. For me, I still, I don't want to sound like a broken record, I still can't get my head around why we did not renew a contract with David McGoldrick. Whichever benchmarks that you use, he played more games than most of the players, so age is not an issue. His quality, he's moved a division up and he's been playing. He kind of fulfilled two roles. He could play as a 10, he could play as a 9, and clearly we've had issues with that, certainly with the 5 games with Alessandro being subbed. I think Luca has come on very well. I think Tyrese Hall is coming on very well. People in the, I spoke to in the Barnsley dressing will tell you the huge benefit of having someone like a David McGoldrick in the dressing room each day. Players come in, look up to David McGoldrick. He's a pro that's done it, been at the top level, and we missed that. I think we missed that. I think he ticked so many boxes, and let's be honest, we only had him because he was a Notts fan. It wasn't the data model that recruited him. It's David McGoldrick approaching Notts County. I'd like to come and play for Notts County, my boyhood club. But look, he's gone. He ain't coming back. But this did rear its ugly head yesterday evening in terms of people's interpretations of squad, and I think also the brothers making the point, and I would believe them, that this is the highest budget they have allocated since they arrived here. I think the issue is, or the debating point is, have they got value for that money? Right, I was about to knock off, but this has suddenly sparked everyone into life again. Massive squad we have this season in terms of numbers. says John Parr. Ian Cooksey, here's one from the past. McManus, Richards, O'Brien, Probert, Needham, Stubbs, Carter, Mann, Brad, Vinter, Scanlon would do me tomorrow. What a team that was. One of the best, agrees Bud Chatwin. Harvey E. I wasn't sure if Luca pulled up on Tuesday and was therefore subbed at half time as a result of that. Hopefully it was only cram. Richard Terry. I'd recommend all Notts fans to look at Frank Rothwell, the Oldham chairman and saviour. Met him in the National League, and he's a brilliant, down-to-earth human being. Didn't he row across the Atlantic or do something like that, Richard? Or am I getting confused with somebody else? Adam Kent on a squad, counters, Cherry, short times 2, Palmer, Yates, Draper, Johnson, Lunder, Garner, Leggins. I think he, I think he means Andy Legg without the ings, and Gary McSwegan. Ian Cooksey. I can only close my eyes and remember that squad at its peak and think about how good it really was. Andy Esom, bit of travel and traffic news. Road closures to County Road and Cattle Market Road in place post-match. So I'm guessing they're going to close down that road with for the Oldham fans to exit. So just be aware of that. James Moore, I agree. Regards, Mr. McGoldrick. We missed out big time by not brokering a deal. Okay, I think that's about it for tonight. We've done 70 minutes, longer than I normally manage on a Friday night. I'm going for a lie down now. Or is there any football on the telly? There's normally something, isn't there? Ian Cooksey. Oh, here's a stat. 50 years on Thursday since that win at Leeds. Super Scan and Super Knots. Yes, I was there. I was about 11 or 12, went with my dad. I think after the game, it's probably one of the most scariest moments of my life when I think the Leeds fans were rampaging all over the place, weren't they? On a par with after we won at Chelsea, which, of course, gives me a chance to remind everyone, Radi Avramovich, Friday, October the 24th. If you've not got your ticket, you will be named and shamed. A tenner. Trevor Christie is coming as well. Got some other names to announce next week. Make sure you get your tickets. Some of these shirts behind me will be up for a raffle. It will be a great night. I've spoken to quite a few more players, and so we're expecting to get a decent turnout of Raddy's teammates for a truly one-off event. Tenner, buy them. You know where to go. Richard Terry, yes. Frank Rothwell twice rode the Atlantic at the age of 73 solo. Crikey, that's some bloody achievement, isn't it? I've got 11 years to even get to 73, let alone consider rowing the Atlantic. Elvis Bott, it's Bournemouth versus Fulham tonight. Okay, I might take a little look. Gazali, I bought FC26 this week. Kelleroos benched. I've brought in a free keeper from Brazil. League of Ireland TV has a good match on, says Greza Maxwell. You got one of Richard Stanton's dodgy sticks. James Moore. Let's hope the weather calms down. It's blowing a proper gale at the minute in Ofton. I don't know where Often. He's obviously not quite spelt it right. Ollerton, I'm not quite sure where he might be at the minute. Still waiting for the Friday night takeaway to be delivered. Greza Maxwell, table of 10 awaiting confirmed. It's all done, Greza. Don't you worry. You will have a table of 10 at the front. Just to the left or just to the right of our main event sponsor, Martin Kelp. Thank you, Martin, for that. Elfriton. I was trying to work it out, James Michelle. I'm in Elfriton. There you go. Gresa Maxwell. I pay £6.99 a month for my stick. I'll have you know. Wrexham v Brum on 2, says Andy. So there's plenty of football tonight. Thank you, one and all. Enjoyed your company tonight. Thank you. That's probably the most interactions, messages by far that we've had on the Friday Night Magpie Live. So thank you very much for that. Makes my job a lot easier on these occasions. I must just conclude by saying thank you to our official Magpie Circle partners, the Big Shed at the Trent Navigation, who put on a great spread today for Kim Walster, who's gone up to the pearly gates. She'll be sat in the Pavis equivalent or whatever beyond those gates, sat down with Jimmy Cyril, a mum, and loads of other Notts fans who've gone up into the skies, hoping they can watch us get 3 points and continue our recent excellent home form under Martin Patterson. We'll have a vlog as usual after the game. Sunday morning, it's the Sunday supplement, and then we will be back on Monday for the Monday midweek. We're then going to have a bit of a break because obviously there is no game the following week. Everyone have a social coke for Kim, says Gaza Lee. Indeed we will. Thank you for all your kind comments about the show. We will keep them coming. Fingers crossed. 3 points tomorrow. Exercises the ghost of Crewe for a little while. See you all soon. Thanks for your participation and commitment to the show. See you Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, the Magpie Sunday Supplement. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.